Alright, this is part 3 of FFT versus FF8, which shall prevail. That's not really what we're focused on. And I had one half-strong corner, but totally ignored 6-9-A4. And I thought this was a perfect time to not check anything with the solver, and just think, based on what we've talked about, what should be the best move, or what should be the moves we'd consider. And I think based on last time, there were kind of 3 responses to a half-strong corner. There was go in 7 and set up to give us 6, but not them 6. So, for instance, I don't think this is like a terrible move, but it does give them their 6-7-6A a lot of play. And I similarly don't think this is like a terrible move or anything, but I think more desirable, my guess is either this or this are the best moves to play, and my instinct would be this is the best moves to play in 9. We're going to use a very simple check of how many opposing moves lose to each of these, and we'll just try all the cards. I would certainly guess this move would be weaker, except that it is actually safe here. Now, that might make it pretty decent. And it actually does set up 6 for us. Actually, this is probably the best of all. It gives non-redundant in 6, and it's safe. And I don't believe they have a big setup in 5. So this looks very good of these. So my current guess is I think this is the best of them. You know, it gives us 6. They have no captures. I think the second best is this. I think third... I really don't want to give up this much power to the right. So I think third best is probably this. And then these are, I think, weaker. So let's try one of the ones I think are weaker. Against this move, the opponent has 12 losing replies. So I thought this was one of the weaker ones. And against this move, they have quite a bit more. 15 losing replies out of 28, so just slightly over half. And then for the better 3, I thought this one... Let's wait a sec. 17. So far I'm just ordering them correctly. And then this was my initial instinct for the best of them, though I switched to thinking 9-5-3-A would be better. 19. So far we're just nailing it. And I think 9-5-3-A is the best of these moves. And it is correct. 25 moves lose. They only have 3 ties. Maybe I should have said this in terms of ties. But we really correctly kind of went down the scale of how these moves do. And this move is very powerful. Their only ties are in 1 or 4, and it is hard to find moves reliably that are good in those squares. Nothing in 6 ties. It's pretty easy for us, even if it's safe in 6, to go in 2. And we'll often be able to set up a threat in 5. Yeah, this is very strong, very difficult for them to play. And they do have a recapture in 6 on 3 if needed, but that's a very easy card for us to attack with its 3 facing out. So this is incredibly strong, and we do have a very good move in the adjacent corner. And I think following kind of what we talked about, not that this is like the hardest situation, but I think I basically just... I did, in fact, just correctly go the weakest to the strongest. And that's neat to be able to do quite accurately with fairly simple principles. The next idea is go in 5 and set up. Most of our cards cannot be set up to have the capture, but 2 can. We could play 9-5-3-A and 5, 9-5-3-A and 5 and set up A5-9-5. And this looks okay to me. I think A5-9-5 landing in 6 is a somewhat serious threat. Specifically, they don't actually have captures back in 9 that we can't combo, which is very nice for us. On the other hand, the square we'd really like to land in is not 6, but 2, because they have such limited ability to put stuff in 6, and we have such strong capability to take back. And I'm not sure we have a great way to do that. My guess is this move is fine. Like, maybe half their moves lose, something like that, which is kind of normal-ish. So that'd be 14 moves lose. That's my prediction. 15. Very close. Damn, I'm doing good in these guesses. But the move that I think is better here is this one, which sets up, you know, a nice same in 6, and both a plus and same wall options in 2. I think this is better. It's not as like, I mean, it's pretty similar to this, but this one had the same in 8 with a 10 facing out. And that's just a really powerful effect. And this version, you know, not that. This version, you know, if we go in 2, we probably have like a 3 or a 4 facing out, or a 5 if we don't want to be hit by combo. So I think this is good. I think this is the better card to put in 5. I'm now going to have the solver give it a score, but I'm not incredibly enthused. Yeah, the solver says 16, very slightly better than the other one. So these both probably give like second turn maybe a slight advantage. But this gave second turn a pretty solid advantage, and this was very close to winning. This is very high pressure. And then the other thing we saw to do was just take immediately. And if we take immediately, I don't want to be vulnerable to a combo from 1. So for instance, this seems unappealing to me. Right? They're going to have a safe card in 3, and while we have 2 cards to attack in 1 and 2, they'll have time to defend the other. They have a safe card, we don't. I think that's bad for us as second turn. I also think this is obvious trouble. You know, maybe we survive, but my quick evaluation is this is very dangerous for us. This, good thing they have Cypher out of their hand, or Cypher in 1 would hurt. But here, they can take back that way. This doesn't take. So I'm between this and this. In general, in the lines we've looked at, it has been better to use the A873 first. So I'm going to guess that this is the stronger move. But this is following, there were kind of 3 ways to deal with a half-strong corner. One way is to take immediately, remove it from the board, and the 2 other things are to either go in 5 or go in 9, setting up against the strong side that we have trouble with. Here, I think we have 2 promising ways to capture. I really want something that specifically is good against this. Moves that are likely to be good here are here or here, ideally controlling what they could put in 5. Now, I do notice they have this annoying way to plus that makes it hard to combo back. But even then, like a position like this, is this winning, actually? I think this is winning. No, there's a tie, I'm dumb. Yeah. Yeah. Alright. I had checked a 2 and 8 and decided it was winning. But like, these positions are pretty decent for us. We can also start this way. And now it's harder for them to do this, just in case we have some point of combo that also flips 6. Yeah, this position is winning, and we do take the combo. Yeah, Squall's pretty bad here. So if we think, like, obviously their standard move is going to be to go in 6. If we have good play against 6 here, both these moves are pretty promising. So let's actually just check the score on it. Yeah, so this they only have 3 ties, and AA3, 3, and 6 is not one of them. They have 1 tie and 1, but it's not the card you'd predict. Oh, I guess this combos. I didn't realize this comboed. That makes it a move you would predict. Okay, so now I think this is best. I totally missed that combos. So that last one only had 3 ties, but one of them's an obvious move to make. This one has 5 ties, but I suspect they're less obvious. Does this tie? This does tie in this line, though. So overall, I think all 3 of these options provide real promise. I think in this case, the best move is this one. Probably followed by maybe this, maybe this. This is fine too. These are all fine moves. I also think a move like this is pretty good still. Obviously, like, pretty clearly, if we're close to winning with a couple different lines, like, we have a big advantage here. And, you know, a move like this that says we're a little better, but they have a bunch of ways out, maybe giving up some advantage. But all these moves, I think, give advantage. And it's nice that we can follow the principles I've tried to draw from the previous and get somewhere with it. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I'd like to move on to strong corners, specifically how to deal with this one. And I thought it was interesting to just check where the losing moves were. So FFTactics in this position has 8 losing moves. And I just was curious what squares they were. And I think it's interesting, 5 of the 8 losing moves were in 4 or 8. So even when they have this huge corner that we don't have at least immediate play against, helping them lock it in is just not all that useful to us. And I think the bigger concession is when we go in 4 or 8, we don't threaten them in the other square. So we're kind of creating a half safety, right? Like if we do, I don't know, just random move. If we do this, like we're giving them this kind of, all right, this one's especially terrible. But even something like this, like we're potentially giving them something safe to do here or a card to lock in. It's just, those moves are on average the most costly. There were also losing moves in 1, 2, and 6. No losing moves in 3, interestingly. Anyways, so the first instinct, I think, is just massively set up in 5 against them. And this is really powerful. In fact, red only has 4 tying moves, and they have to find an exact way to do it to manage it. But 7A, 7, 4, and 8 is incredibly powerful. 7, 3, A8, and 4 is incredibly powerful. And none of these combo squares are shared. Red, in fact, has no recaptures on their starter. This is pretty horrible. They basically have to force the action immediately. The ways to tie are all by blocking up 4 or 8, such that the combos are taken immediately. The longer they last, the more they'll flip extra cards. If you're gonna kind of die on certain squares, better to die on them as quickly as possible and get the damage over with. In this case, if we look at 4 and 8, is the bigger threat in 4 or in 8? Well, the bigger threat's in 8 because it will flip stuff and be safe itself. So actually any move in 8 does manage to tie here. Nothing in 4 does. Nothing anywhere else does. And I think that makes sense. So 5, really good move because it's so easy to get yourself to play 2, 3, or 6 here. Or even like some kind of setup, like something like this, and you're like, okay, Kyros has some play, but it's not enough. So this is just the natural reply. I don't think it would be worth spending too much time on other options. So let's look at the other really strong corner available here. This one, they can take back. AA3-3, for instance, is both recaptures. And it's interesting. Our hand, as the FFTactics player, is kind of better at taking 10s up and down because our A8-7-3s can combine to do so really effectively. So this is a kind of annoying card for us to take. We have Ramza in 6, which is a way to take that is not vulnerable to combos, but it also is capturable for them. They can capture it with pretty high facing out if they want. Maybe not, or A8-7-3 covers some stuff. It's not a capture we're super excited about. And we do not have a capture in 2. So I do think this is a totally reasonable starter for FF8. Like, I think this is one of the better starters available. Maybe the best one we've looked at. And we could take it immediately. I think strongly worth considering taking immediately. And we have 2 different cards that can do that. There's some miracle ties, like this is somehow a tie. Weird move. This is somehow a tie. Again, moves like this aren't actually getting played. The move that's actually getting played is, of course, 2. And then I think this is probably our best move, with the nice point that we have really good control of 5. For instance, this is susceptible to combos multiple ways. This is susceptible to combos multiple ways. And this is susceptible to combos just one way, but it is enough. So they have to find exactly this to tie, which is not like the hardest move, but there are a couple other moves that would be tempting, and FFTactics certainly gets to press here. A5, 9-5, very similar. You know, AA3-3 is still good. Yeah, I think the other move that jumps out from what we've talked about is kind of you either take the capture immediately or you set up against the strong side. The strong side is, of course, the 10 facing out. Our hand isn't really built to and doesn't really have great setups for 5. Maybe this could work here. That looks alright. The other move I looked at was here, which they have 9 ties, 19 losses. That's like pretty good for second turn, not amazing. But there's obviously a game to play, right? This one you're gonna be playing a game. I think fundamentally it's a little it's gonna be difficult to win here because we never have combo play against this side of a strong corner. And you really want to have combo play that will last the turn against a strong corner, right? And that's why this position is so dangerous for first turn, is because we have 2 huge combo squares and they can't block both of them. One of them will last into future turns. And in fact, most players here I think wouldn't block either of them, in which case you're just going to win, or very likely to win. But if you play perfectly, will win. If we look at this one, we can only set up 1 combo square at a time. If we do, they should probably just block the combo square. Yeah, this is a tie. No, I'm sure we're like fine here. Maybe we don't have to recapture there. Maybe this. This looks okay. Yeah, this is a comfortable enough tie. But it's hard for us to win here without some combo play against the strong corner. And if they remove the combo square, we're probably not playing for a win unless our cards line up really well. But in general, we know our cards kind of line up well when our A8 7s take their 9s, but the game's going to be a little more up-down at this point. Probably don't have too much. So I think this is a perfectly decent starter. And in general, strong corners you can recap are pretty reasonable if they won't have combo play against them. And if they will, I think are really, really dangerous because it's so hard to play near them. So, yeah, and we see that with the Dia, right? A Dia would be a pretty good starter if there's no setup. Not actually as good as I'd think, but pretty good. But against a setup, incredibly dangerous. Irvine here is, there's just not that much combo play against it that's going to happen. The numbers line up so much more up-down, not for like downward 9s, but for up-down 10s. And this is pretty good. It was FFT is definitely ahead here, but FFT is ahead in every line. And you should be able to manage a tie here. And so that's it for strong corners. And then I started talking about weak out facing sides next time, where I started doing stuff, but I think I'll just stop here. I think, oops, what's happening? I think, what did we cover today? Yeah, we talked about 6, 9, 8, 4, and 3, which was, I think, really interesting because could test the idea that against these half-strong corners, the main moves are going to be 2, 5, and 9, and correctly evaluating which cards would be best in 9, ranking all 5 cards in correct order, looking at, 5 setups. They're all right here, not as powerful as they were the other way. We can see it's really powerful to have a setup, when we set up in 5, to have setups where the cards that might land in 4 or 8 have high out-facing value. And this one is weaker because, for instance, say A873 is our card for both squares. It's got a 3 facing out from 2, and it's a lot harder to win with that. Or a 7A7 4 and 2 is a 4 facing out. It's still much harder to win with that, especially when our opponent has combo play against both 3s and 4s. So, in fact, no red card can, no, sorry, I was confusing who's who. A595 can go in 2 without being comboed. Alright. So I think it was interesting to have a move I hadn't looked at and get to test it with the theses of the previous. And I've tried to do that throughout. Like generally when there have been multiple starters of a type, I kind of look at one, see what conclusions I can draw, and then see how well they apply to the next one. Obviously, I've played Triple Triad before, so I'm injecting a lot of my kind of personal thoughts, but really just exploring what the solver's telling me here, because I think it's interesting. And it doesn't quite line up. Like, there are lots of positions where, like, I don't know, let's say this is played, and the solver's like, every move but one loses, but like the one that doesn't lose is this. And you're like, oh, but people are going to play that move, right? It's not like this is an incredibly hard move to find locking in 9. Now, I have no idea if this example actually, like, I'm not claiming that the solver gave this evaluation here. I'm saying there are lots of positions where the solver goes, oh, there are very few ties here, and you're like, okay, but every move a human would actually play here is one of those very few ties. This is not actually good pressure. And then you see other positions where it's like, I don't know, here, right? Or, you know, some like random or feeling move, and the solver's like, oh, there are 10 ties here. And then you look at which move the 10 ties are, and like, you know, this, say like, this ties, but this doesn't, and this ties, but this doesn't, or this doesn't, you know, and you start going, oh, a lot of similar looking moves have different evaluations. This is a hard position to play well, even if there are actually more ties available, right? Or you look at a position where it's like, say this is the starter, or, you know, say, I don't know, you know, something like this, and it's like, oh, there are 5 ties, and you're like, what are the 5 ties? And they're like, well, this ties, and this ties, and this ties, and this ties. And you're like, oh, those are really, really, really hard to find. And also, if you examine them any deeper, they all just barely tie with some incredible move to follow up as well. And you're like, okay, in practice, even if you did find one of those moves, you might lose. And it's really hard to find and play one of those moves. So can't just hew to exactly the counts it gives, but they're a useful indicator. And I've, generally speaking, in this series, you know, I get the counts to just get a sense of where the moves might be dangerous, but then I explore them a bit. And, you know, if you have a position like this and it says, ah, yes, this is the most powerful move, and then this ties easily, I go, okay, you know, you only gave them 1 tie, but the 1 tie was the move they're going to make most of the time. And also now I'm in trouble. Maybe this is actually a bad move, not a good move, right? It gave them the fewest ties of any move, but the tie was easy to find, and once they found it, now I need to find a tie, and that's hard. So generally the moves I try to prefer are moves where, even if they find their best possible moves, I'm not struggling to tie. It's like comfortable. I have multiple paths or clear paths to a tie, at least a tie, and where they have lots of plausible moves that are losing. I don't care much about the pure count of, or as much about the pure count of wins and losses. I care more about, like, do the plausible, natural looking moves lose? Do they tie? Do they tie but they're under a lot of pressure? Do they tie easily? But that said, I think we had a nice exploration of Cypher in 3, and we also talked about Adia here and Irvine here. And we're through about 23 of 90 starters. We're about a quarter of the way through. And next time we will talk about weak outfacing sides, which is quite interesting.